a really exciting subject, student pathways. Before we begin, I'm going to just do a quick audience poll. So with a raise of hands, how many of you are involved in student affairs? And then how many of you are faculty members? Okay, awesome. So we have a room full of student affairs. So we're all in good company. And then the second question is, how many have engagement benchmarks related to or correlated with retention specifically? Okay. So in that note, I'm very excited to welcome our very amazing presenters. Our first, hold on, one more question. How many measure the relationships between co-curricular activity and retention? Okay, so very similar. All right, so Lauren is from Cedar Crest College, and I'll let her take it away.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As Kristen said, I'm from Cedar Crest College. We're located in Allentown, Pennsylvania, about an hour outside of Philadelphia and 2 hours outside of New York City. In my role at Cedar Crest, I'm the Director of Student Union and Engagement. Very short title for a long expansion of what I do. So I oversee student engagement, so that's all of our clubs and organizations on campus, any engagement that happens outside of the classroom, our campus bookstore, dining services, and then they also, ironically enough, tacked on this conference services piece, which has been an exciting endeavor in the last year and a half. My bachelor's degree is from Cedar Crest College in Communications and Marketing, and then my master's degree is from Penn State University. Cedar Crest College is a 4-year liberal arts institution. We have undergraduate and graduate programs. We are a women's college. What that means, that term is used loosely, I feel like, right now. But we are still a women's college. We enroll men and women, but men can only be part-time. And in our adult and graduate education program, they can be full-time in certain academic majors. So all women living on our campus, and currently our enrollment is just over 1,500 students, with the capacity to house about 500 on our campus. So before we kind of take a deep dive into Cedar Crest College, let's talk about what, as student affairs practitioners, which we all are, what our role is. So the student success pathway happens in 3 different areas: academic, co-curricular, and then social. And our role, even though we're all student affairs practitioners and we probably aren't worried as much about that bubble on the left-hand side, it is our role to kind of blend all of those 3 things together, because at the end of the day, right, it's all about the student experience. And we want to make sure that when they graduate in 4 years or 5, depending on what their subject is, that they have this holistic student experience. Inside the classroom, studies show that students are only spending about 20% of their college education inside the classroom. That means that everyone in this room has that other 80% to make up for learning and what happens when they're not in their academic rigor. 30% of students need additional academic support. We have interventions with early-based alert systems, but really, when we look at it, this is only covering students that meet that C grade or below. Our AB students are the ones that we're not as focused on, and those really are in the students that we are finding taking a deeper dive in the co-curricular experience, because they're doing well in the classroom and they want to exceed outside of the classroom. Oftentimes, we're doing this afterward, right? This isn't something that we're doing in a manner that we're trying to be proactive, rather just reactive. So outside of the classroom, as we talked about, we're not addressing the high-performing AB students. We need to make sure that our rigor for out-of-classroom engagement is just as strong as the rigor for in-classroom. These are students that want a big bite of college. They want that experience that we talk about. They don't want to just be in class and learning a few hours a day. They want to be a part of clubs and organizations. They want to go to speakers. They want to be engaged in different events and programs outside of the classroom, and it's our role to provide that for them. Some market trends that we're seeing: how do we create a guided pathway for community colleges when primarily those students are commuter students, non-residential? Some choose the commuter college because of financial reasons, but some also choose it because they're working full-time, they're only going to the college for certain hours of the day to go to their classes. So we're starting to see a bigger focus there to create the same environment that we are in our four-year institutions with residential learning. Learning outcomes to match with student affairs and academic affairs. How do we tie those two things together, again, to create this holistic learning experience? I'm sure everyone in this room knows that when you talk to different faculty in your campuses, there's such a tremendous focus on the academic experience, right? What they're doing in the classroom, their academic rigor, that is what defines their college experience. And I hope that everyone kind of takes that message and says, oh wait, there's us, right? There's us that is doing really great things with our students and really creating this environment for them to learn tenfold outside of the classroom. So again, it's all about serving students. And this is what was an interesting crossroads for Cedar Crest College. When I came back to the college about 4.5 years ago, student engagement was doing okay, but there were no benchmarks to see how well we were doing. There was no assessment to say, this is what our students like to do, or this is what they want to be engaged with. We were judging our success based on how many people left the room with a smile. Okay. If we end with a joke, it's an easy win. But it wasn't really anything that we could tell our story. So when we're talking with faculty, when we're talking with our board of trustees, and we're trying to get additional funding for the programs that we're doing, it was hard to tell the story about why we should have this. So we had decentralized assessment efforts. So every single department across campus had their own calendar. They had their own programs and organizations that they were running. And it was up to the student to find that information, to go to the office and say, hey, where's your calendar? Or where can I access that information? Everyone was using different tools. So when we would present to our VP and we would say, here's our presentation for the Board of Trustees, every single person's information looked different. So it was hard to tell a similar story when it was coming from student affairs. Oftentimes we had a low response rate. Only about 25% of our students would fill it out. And that's 25% of the engaged students, okay? And our assessment efforts were at the end of the semester, sometimes the end of the year. And we were saying, hey, remember on September 20th? What'd you think about that? It's very hard for them to remember what they did last week with the intentions of everything that's going on throughout the semester. Let alone to give us accurate representation of how we were doing and what we should do better for our students. So decentralized model is kind of what we had. And the result of this was we had a ton of papers with Excel spreadsheets or paper sign-in sheets about this high on my desk with dates on it. And hopefully I didn't lose that before we put it into an Excel spreadsheet. It was all over the place. It was out of date, so lines were backing up when we had students come in so that they could fill out, because some people practiced their calligraphy, right, when they came up to sign into an event, and other people wrote so sloppily that I couldn't even tell that they were there. So when we were looking at who our students were that we were engaging with, it was hard to tell. And when we were sending out our survey, I didn't know that the student that attended 4 or 5 different events was filling out that survey in the same way that they were when they were at that program. So it was hard. There was different data points all over our campus, and then it could take a really long time for us to sort through that, the statistics we were getting to really tell an accurate story about what we were providing for our students. So our students in Gen Z, that's who's coming in our doors right now into college. They are digital, right? Everything. I challenge you to find a student that does not bring their cell phone with them anywhere. They forget their ID card so they can't swipe in for their meal. They forget their card to get back into the residence hall so they can never get back in, but they're never without their phone. They're a very digital group of folks. They're instant. They want instant information right now when they want it. Google, right? How many people, when you want something, do you go to Google and figure it out? I was going to take the City Walk shuttle last night. I went to Google to find out what was that City Walk. I wanted it right then and there to make my decision, and I'm not even part of this generation. And then they want relevant information. What we also found was we were doing a planner for our students. So it had every event and program pre-populated in there for the entire year. I thought I was winning because every other school would give away a planner and it just had a really fancy cover that had the school's name on it. But I was taking all the time to reach out to all the campus offices, get their information. What are your events and programs, right? I also oversee conference services. So I was putting that information into our scheduling system and giving it to our students like I was giving them gold at the beginning of the year. What was happening though, was I was getting that information in May or June to get a print deadline. And by the time September, October, even November rolled around, that information became irrelevant because if a room changed, if our athletics group had a schedule change, one time that they went to that planner and what was in it wasn't accurate, I became unreliable and irrelevant. This group wants relevant. So it was important, as I thought I was doing something really, really great for them, it was falling by the wayside. At this point in time, I was looking at a bunch of different things, and this is when I partnered with Oohlala Mobile. I realized that we needed a mobile strategy. Knowing that Gen Z wanted that information, they wanted it relevant, they wanted instant information, and it was all mobile. It became apparent that I needed to do a mobile strategy, right, with some different folks around our campus to bring to them everything that they were looking for. We wanted holistic information, so we wanted all of this information in one platform, a one-stop shop that they could go to. No more Excel dumps. We wanted improved response rates. So Oohlala was great, and not only did they provide us a platform that we could have this app with all this information for our students that acted much like their resource for events and programs, I also got to do some assessment with that. So anytime that we had an event or a program on there, whether it was a career planning information survey, or if it was an event that I was running on campus, or the dining services was introducing something new in the menu, we created QR codes. They scanned in for those. And the next time they went into the app, it said, hey, Kristen, I know that you were at the open mic night like last night. What did you think of that? 1 out of 5 stars. So they're providing instant information, and there's a little box there for a comment. Hey, this was great. We really loved it. So it gave us the opportunity to get improved response rates because it was happening instantaneously. So I began at that point to be able to be part of the retention conversation, which I was never a part of before because that was academic only. In the room full of folks that was talking about why our students were staying from first year to second year, the person involved in student engagement was never invited to the conversation until we got this. Because I had data to provide to them to say, this is how our students are engaging. This is what they're going to, this is what they want to see, and this is what they think. So now I'm a part of the conversation in a way that I never was before. And it's cost effective. I cannot tell you what this has done for us and to save in revenue. To not have somebody staffed at the front of an event or a program for people to check into. To not pay the hours of those folks to put that information then into spreadsheets and then to correlate that into one document so that I can share with my boss. So that was, it was the game changer for student engagement to latch onto a mobile strategy, specifically with the folks at Oohlala, because there's so much more than just providing a platform for students to learn about what's happening on campus and to engage, but actually to take us to a place where we were not only providing, but understanding what our students wanted immediately after. So this is where we were before. All of these different places had different measures of reaching out to students, giving them information. And then it all came down to the Cedar Crest operating system, the Cedar Crest College app. So now all of these separate entities live in one area. They each have a tile, it's in one place, there's a single sign-on, and students can get any of this information at the click of a button on their phone. So here's some app screenshots for you. This is very recently. It's a one-stop shop, as I said, for students. Not only are they engaging, I'm blocking you. Not only are they engaging with one another on the campus wall, much like a Facebook feed, they're also able to see what clubs and organizations we have on campus, who are those executive board members, and how do I attend a meeting. They also can connect and engage with peers. This is our campus wall. The student feed is most oftentimes used, but as you can see at the top, there's lost and found things. Hey, we have a ton of commuter students, so who's coming from Bethlehem at around 9 a.m. on Thursday? I can connect with those students in one way. I'm not having to manage that word of mouth around campus and try to make those connections on my own. So we did this just under 2 years ago. And within the first year, we had an 85% adoption rate of our students that logged on to the app, our faculty and our staff, which is just a tremendous success for us. I think 85% is lower than I would want. I want that number to be 100. But looking at the folks that are using the app, this is something that we're very, very pleased with because this is a percentage higher than any other platform we have ever utilized when it comes to engaging with our students. So this is just some data from our app. We had over 700 interactions. That's student to student speaking with one another, engaging with one another in a similar platform. 80% of the questions were responded to. This I want to kind of flesh out a little bit because what we've been intentional about is to ask every single office to have kind of a point person, to take ownership over their area. Because as we're in the middle of summer right now, we had our summer orientation, our one-day introduction for our first-year students, but we're getting ready for that August orientation where they're going to come and take a really deep dive 4 days before the start of the school year. So questions are happening now of like, what do the pictures look like in Steinbright Hall? How can I hang my posters on the wall of Moore? When do we get our campus bills? When will I find out who my roommate is and what house I live in or what residence hall I live in? All information, right, that we all share at orientation, but for one reason or another, they didn't get that. Here's a great way for us to allow students to respond because the responses feel more genuine then. If I'm hearing from a student, it becomes more valuable. But if they don't respond instantaneously, our offices are responding. So no longer are these questions, because let's be totally honest, these questions were still happening before we had this app. They were just happening on Facebook or private messenger and email, and God only knows what the responses were. But now we have the opportunity for our offices to take ownership of them, respond to them in the way that we want if our students aren't doing it right away. So we typically do like a 24-hour response rate for our offices if we notice that students aren't kind of taking the reins there. 90% recommend the app to their peers, which is fantastic, and over 33,000 organic conversations happening. That's one-on-one with one another, reaching out, hey, this happened to me today, congratulations. We introduced this to our students in May when they come for their first orientation, so there's a lot of our peer mentors are posting on the app, hey, congratulations, Lauren, I know you're graduating today from Parkland High School, way to go, we can't wait for you to be a Falcon. So we're already introducing them to our community in the summer. So we solved this by a couple of different ways. The issue that we had about not getting instantaneous data. This is what a screenshot looks like from the user's perspective, the administrative portal on the back end, allowing us to create these QR codes to mark who is attending what. It works very simply with your phone and a camera that students just come, they scan in, it takes a millisecond, sometimes it scans quicker than I'm ready for, but students are able to log in or sign into an event instantaneously, and we have real-time feedback for who is in the room at any given time. I can see how many folks are interacting in a different program. We also have the opportunity, right here, as I showed you, this is the camera view, but if somebody for some reason doesn't have their phone with them, we also have the opportunity to log them in on the back end. It kind of goes back to what we talked about before, having to do a little bit more intentional data dumping, but very few students, I would say at any given event, I might have to do that for one student or two students who cracked a phone, lost it, or didn't have it, and we were solving a crisis in that moment. They can rate their experience. This is just an example of what I showed you before, how they can log in, give a 1 out of 5, and then just a brief option for a comment. When I first introduced this, I thought, okay, how many students are going to give a comment? Because that's what we faced before. They didn't take 3 seconds to provide us instantaneous information, but so many students do give comments. They do the 1 out of 5 stars, but then they'll just write something quick, like this was great or super informative. I love it. I'll be back again. Or my favorite was a student who had become a little bit of a problem child for me early on in our first year experience survey and said, why were there no nachos? Students love nacho bars. So I'm thinking, okay, we just spent about $4,000 bringing this world-renowned speaker in to talk to you about the benefits of financial management and all of and they were fun and engaging, and she was talking about a nacho bar. So what did I do? The very next Friday when we had our first year experience, they came out of that session and there was a full nacho bar set up in our cyber cafe. And I saw that girl and I said, I heard your feedback, enjoy, right? And it was that moment where her face was like, oh my gosh, they read the feedback we said. But it was just a silly little thing that we did for our students. But when you hear their feedback instantaneously and there is a series of events that you're doing, you have the opportunity to change midway through if you need to or you can, rather than waiting to the end of the semester. And then there's this assessment dashboard. So after the event happens and your students come and they're engaging, you can go in and see how many students attended my event. What did they think of it? What were the comments? And then you can use this data to see how you can change that. If it's a one-off program, maybe the next time you do it, you take this feedback and change it. If you were a rock star, keep on going, right? Because you did the right thing. But this has been invaluable for us because I no longer have to wait to the end of the semester. It feels genuine. Our students feel engaged. They feel like their comments are being heard in a way that never allowed them to do that before. This is just some of the feedback. This is what it looks like on their screen when it pops up for them to allow. You can change this question here. Any feedback or comments is kind of a generic one, but given the event, right, we want it to feel genuine to them. So how did you feel about Lauren's presentation? How did you feel about Dr. Corino's presentation on, biology? So it gives them, it feels different. So for our students, this is what their profile looks like. We want to give them the opportunity to build a co-curricular resume. What that means is, what are they doing outside of the classroom that they can talk about in a job interview? Because we all know what the statistics are, right? Anybody in here from career planning or have some kind of focus on career? Okay. I work very intentionally with our director of career planning, and this to her is pivotal, because when students are checking into different kinds of events, and they can be social or they can be events where they're going to a speaker, they're participating in a study abroad, anything you assign a QR code to shows up in their attended events. So it comes up on their profile. And then they use this in the career planning office when they're building their resume and they're able to talk about their campus experience and their college experience. They use this information to say, what did you do? Because it's hard to remember what you did. I don't remember what sessions I went to on Thursday. I can look back, and that was just 2 days ago. But so imagine asking them in their junior year when they're getting ready to go to an internship or they're trying to apply for a job, what they engaged with in their freshman and their sophomore, junior, earlier in their junior year. It's very hard. So this co-curricular resume is key to being able to tell the story about who they are through their college years. And again, real-time intervention for administrators. This is what it looks like from a back-end view as an administrator. So how are we doing in terms of how our students are being engaged? When we take huge dips, what happened during those months? Were there less events planned? Were things going on in a society as a whole that we should probably address in a different way? How many services do we have on campus, and who's utilizing those services? So if we have services that aren't being utilized at all, is it because they're not promoting the fact that students can sign into their different offices? Are they because they're in an area that's unrecognizable, so maybe we need to be more intentional in orientation about showing students where that is? And then just basic things for just how events were tracked. We are oftentimes offices of very small offices with limited individuals, so we can't be everywhere at once. I can tell on any given event on our campus how many people attended and can help that person, if it wasn't an event that lived under my area, what we could do to make that better for them. This is another example of real-time intervention. So creating the opportunity for automated reminders for students. So when advising time comes, especially our first-year students, hey, it's the third week of November. You should probably reach out to your advisor and get an appointment scheduled so you can get your courses scheduled for the following semester. Event recommendations. This is based on who they are, what their academic major is, and then maybe other events that they've attended. So this event recommendation, we're able to see, okay, so Lauren has attended 3 different things from the career planning office, right? We see that she's intentional about career and job readiness. The job market's happening. We should send her a reminder of it. And this is what it looks like on your phone. So when we piloted the program last year, we wanted to see how this would work for our students. We understand that any change sometimes is unwelcomed, or they don't want to do it, or they drag their feet. It's one more thing for them to sign in. But we piloted the program with 18 events. We had 272 attendees at those events. 100% of our students provided feedback, 100%. And if you remember before, I was at a 32% response rate. So this was tremendous for us, and the average rating was 4.5 out of 5. So those lower rating things, we changed them. We were intentional about what we were doing for the next step, and it just paid us back tenfold. Examples of feedback, this is how we see it. So when I go back to telling the story, this is what I use now when I tell my story about what we're doing for students, how we are providing an impact for them, and how they're taking that information forward. I can provide this. I'm no longer just saying it because someone smiled when they walked out of the room when we were talking about career readiness. I can say it because we have real-time feedback from students with their text and their words. So our goals for the next year, we asked in the beginning about who has benchmarks created for student engagement. We are on our way to go there. I talked about me being now invited to that retention meeting and being in the room. So creating benchmarks for engagement. So as much as we can talk about what we're doing, how do we prove that this is why we are retaining students? How many events does it take for a student to be fully engaged to a campus or university? So that's what we want to look at. What are we providing for our students to say, if these students attend this many events on campus, we know that they will retain to the second year or to their third year or fourth. Also, we want to do a full-scale implementation across campus. Right now, we've taken a really deep dive in student affairs, but we want this in academic affairs, financial services, and all of those different offices across campus that we know are important for our students. Because this is important for us. It's really important for them. When I do the data for my app, I see that the top 3 tiles are college email, dining services, and athletics. All 3 offices that did not invest initially in this, but are taking tremendous interest in what's going on. What we need to be cognizant of is that we need to think from a student perspective and provide a student experience. Providing feedback from students and giving those snapshots from students to students becomes more powerful than me telling the story. They are telling my story, and it becomes great. So thinking from a student perspective and providing student feedback to other students has been tremendous. And then deciding what a successful student pathway is for Cedar Crest. How do we take that academic experience, mix it with the co-curricular, add in these social pieces to create a really strong student pathway? That's what's important. So that's what we'll be focused on, and we wouldn't be able to do it without this tool. And the partnership that we have had with Oohlala, it has been tremendous. When I look at why we have been successful in the last 2 years, it has really been this mobile strategy that we have created. Our students absolutely love it. They are talking with other students about downloading the app before my session happens at orientation. So it's absolutely fantastic. And then we really, at the end of the day, want to measure the out-of-classroom experience with some diligence and intentionality to make the students feel like their voices are being heard, because they're so often more times than not going to respond if they know that their insight and their feedback is being heard and implemented with the following programs. Thanks.
This is where we see a lot of students engage academically with our institution, but I want to introduce to you how that we're now taking that engagement co-curricularly in what we're doing. So let me tell you a little bit about who I am. My name is Shane Pruitt. I just finished a doctoral degree in higher education administration from the University of Memphis. Before that, I got my love of higher education from the University of Oklahoma, where I had a master's in higher education there. And I've been asked to serve as an assessment committee member for our institution. As a matter of fact, I'm in charge of all assessment practices for the Division of Student Affairs. What's really fun about my school is that athletics is in student affairs, enrollment in student financial services is in student affairs. We have a lot of different things that we look at, and student engagement is emerging as a great opportunity for us to see how we're serving our students. If you want to contact me, there's my email. So let me tell you a little bit about what our school looks like. So we are a small private liberal arts institution in Atlanta, Georgia, with enrollment of about 1,200 students. We have an interesting facet of our student population. About 300 of them are adult degree-seeking students. Fun fact about Oglethorpe, in the 1930s, we had America's very first radio station on any college campus in Atlanta, right? And what we did was put 50-minute lectures on the radio. That was what they were used for. And they would, adults would correspond with Oglethorpe and get their degree through the radio. And we've kind of had that same type of engagement with our adults. It's a really fun fact about Oglethorpe. Other types of student populations that we have on our campus, 40% first-gen students, which is emerging. Diversity is emerging on our campus. In the past 7 years, we've had a 34% increase in different types, mostly at-risk populations coming to be a part of our student makeup of our student population. 98% of our students receive financial aid, which is a little bit different from a lot of other private schools we may be looking at. So one thing that Oglethorpe has done very well, I'm very proud to say that we are excelling in, is this life after Oglethorpe, the outcome of an Oglethorpe degree. So we have seen in our outcome survey over the past 3 years, 90% of our alumni members are satisfied with the job that they get after graduation. They like that their occupation has been related to their career goals the entire time. We've helped them achieve that. And then 85% of our graduating class is employed within 6 months after graduating from Oglethorpe, employed or going to grad school. So we are proud of that. So proud that we made this crazy promise. We call it the petrel promise. We're the stormy petrels. Petrel is a small seafaring bird who never gives up. He lives like 8 months in the ocean. So that's what we are. We're small but mighty. So this is our promise that we made to our little small but mighty petrels. If you don't get a job 6 months or get to grad school 6 months after you graduate from Oglethorpe, we're going to give you that 5th year free, because we need to help you figure some more things out. So that's the promise we've made to our students. But in making that promise, we've had to really make sure that we're setting up our students for success as much as possible, which includes a new strategy for engaging students co-curricularly and assessing that. So before I came 2 years ago in student engagement and leadership, my office, as it were, was basically 7 different siloed committees that ebbed and flowed with 3 different directors, and nobody knew what was going on. And so in a lot of ways, we were doing a lot of anecdotal sort of looks at what our students were experiencing. I was brought in to bring all that together under one office. And so not only was I writing a dissertation, but I was trying to get all these rabbits in the same little cage. And I needed help, because I knew, first off, that we needed to have some data to prop up this promise that we were making to our students, that you're going to have an engaging time here at Oglethorpe that's going to set you up for a job. So what we were looking for is a new decision-making model that we could rely more on metrics. And I wanted it to be a more student-centered, data-driven movement in that direction that didn't rely so much on the anecdotes. One broken way that we tried to make these connections with the experience and how students were doing at Oglethorpe is through tracking student engagement, mostly activities through swipe cards. That got expensive for our small little school that has no money, because that hardware breaks We need a lot of it, and if we're trying to track 12 different events throughout all of campus, we just don't have enough, so we can't. It was really hard to collect data because these things basically spit out into an Excel spreadsheet that I had to like pack in a huge thing and put it who knows where. I don't even know where I was uploading the spreadsheets half the time. It was really clunky. It took a lot of my time or student time as student leaders that should be pioneering on our campus. We're actually doing data entry, and that wasn't fair to them and their experience. And ultimately, we missed some events due to having the lack of accessibility for hardware. So we knew we had to go mobile. Like I said, I started 2 years ago. A year before that, we had already partnered with Oohlala, and they had already done a great job helping us to get students to realize that we had a branded Oglethorpe app. But I wanted to make sure that we just didn't have a portal for our students, but we also had a strategy to go alongside it. So it was there. How are we going to use it? I wanted to put myself in the student's shoes. I'm a young director of student engagement, and I understood, as I'm also tied to my phone, that that's where everyone is going. So let's figure out how we can meet the students where they are. That was my mantra to my team the entire time. Let's meet them where they are. Customer service, customer service, customer service is my philosophy for student engagement. So we wanted to do, just like Lauren did at Cedar Crest, something that was relevant and fast for our students. Here's what we built with the Oglethorpe app. It included relevant information that made students excited about what brought them to Oglethorpe, such as the Petrel Promise, other services that we had across campus, especially all of our campus resources, such as information on financial aid, information on even things like mental health, all sorts of different things that they'll be looking for. We put on the app just like at Cedar Crest as well. What we were trying to do is build a community in the palm of their hand, because we know that students live virtually these days. They may not like to talk to people face to face, but they sure do like talking to their phones. So let's make sure that they feel that community right there. So once we've built this community, I knew that we could start to finally measure engagement across the entirety of campus. What we had to do in order to, the final piece that we had to put in place for to be able to be successful in that is to make sure that everyone downloaded the app. That was a big challenge. But after a robust orientation program and me putting the Oglethorpe app on every footer, every email, every poster, in a couple months, 100% of our full-time enrollment, 1,200 students, had downloaded our app, 100%. And 93% of them were able to tell me that they would tell others that, hey, I found this app really successful, we built this well, I feel connected and there's a community here, so let's continue to download it. So our first year students were really easy to get to download the app, but what about our sophomores, juniors, and seniors? After all this great information that the first year students were learning and understanding, they put it up to their mentors. They said, well, I'm learning all this here. I have all my questions answered. You should download it too. So the energy from the first year students actually bled up into the upperclassmen, which is a little bit different than what I expected would happen, but energy solves a lot of problems. Also, parents were telling their students to download the app. So during family weekend, which actually happens in probably about 4 weeks into school, we bring parents back, and then we told the parents to download the apps, and then they told their students, hey, you need to download this. This is going to be helpful for you. So we brought in a couple of different stakeholders, even including our parents, faculty, and other staff members. So here's what it looks like on our app usage for the first 6 months of 2016. We already had 426 relevant questions on the campus wall that actually had to do with services, functions, and needs of students. 72% of those questions were answered. What I love about this is that I answered very little of them because I have orientation leaders, I have peer academic leaders, I have others in the community who are watching this for me, and they're happy to respond. It's easy to respond online, and they feel like they're making a big difference, especially whenever I say that this is a great way to help the first year students and everyone in our community be more engaged. It only takes 11 minutes to answer a student question on average, which I really appreciated as well. This is what made me the most happy about our app experience. 3 out of 4 students felt like that The app helped them to feel like they're a bigger part of the Oglethorpe community. So here's a look at how students are actually viewing events on the app. So as we're looking at how students love to see the co-curricular experience mobily, in 2015, the first year that I was there, we had 8,800 views on the app. By 2016, we're still growing, almost 10,000 views. So this is what I love. If I had a student, so if you break this down to average views per student, that's basically 10 times a student viewed the app for an event or service in the semester. If I had a student go to any other service on campus, whether it be career development or the advisor or something like that, 10 times, we would say that it's a success. So mobily, students are logging in a lot, more than any other resource on campus, and so I feel like that the investment was really good for us. Not just events, but also not just events, but also allows us to take a look at what students are most interested in. So we had an anatomy fashion show that in September the students loved a lot. So I got to go to my student leaders that put on that anatomy fashion show and said, you won. You won the month of September. Guess what? Here's this prize, and continue to do what you're doing. Let's now give you an opportunity to tell your story to our other student leaders so that they can be on the same level as you are. So we're using this data to inform our student leaders so that actually they're the ones teaching others behind them to build up their events. Not just event views, we're looking at services as well. Students were also looking at, in September, dining services, campus safety, and what's happening in the recreation center. And so I was able, again, to go to those departments and say, students are wanting to hear more information about you. Let's either beef up your portion of the app, or let's figure out how you can make yourself an even bigger part of our mobile engagement. And they appreciate that as well. Pretty soon we had every service on campus going into our app because, of course, 100% of our students are there looking for information. So this past year, this is what we were able to achieve. 100% of our events on campus were being tracked to the app, 100%. We had over 950 individual events inputted into the app and tracked. Now, my office, student engagement and leadership, wanted to intentionally track 130 of those events that we were endorsing, that we were doing. Things like bystander intervention, student government association meetings, things of that nature. There are others that we put on there that happen to be like private student organization sort of gatherings, other things that my office wasn't really that interested in tracking. But of these events, we had about an average of 17 students arrive at each of these events that we tracked that was under student engagement and leadership, which for our school, an average of 17 students coming to a bystander intervention program is huge. And so it was really neat that we were able to see students get more active and involved in these programs that my office was putting on. Of course, we had a lot of the same average rating here. And what we were getting is real-time feedback to help improve our programs time after time. This is what was exciting and why I was why I was ultimately interested in putting 100% of the activities that we had on the app. We found that app usage could predict how students were going to do at Oglethorpe University. So we know that if students are on the app, they're more likely to attend an event. So if that's true, we're looking as a way to figure out, as students are attending events, how can that predict retention for them? This is what we found after tracking 100% of our events on campus. If a student went to at least 5 events in that semester, they were going to arrive again in the spring. If they did not go to 2, so 2 or less, we knew they were going to drop out. So as an early intervention strategy, we were able to say, hey, John, you have only gone to 1 event in the first semester. Internally, I know that they're probably not interested to come back in the spring. I take that to our Student of Concern Committee. We call them up using a residence life official. The Dean of Students calls. She's great about that. Students love her. And we're able to say, hey, we need to get you more engaged. What are you interested in? What can we help you get engaged with? So We know that on our campus, this is true. We have to get students to this many events or they're in real danger of not arriving back on our campus. So we're now using a three-pronged approach for our early alert system. First, before I came, we just used grades. And we also had this WOOFU form, basically, that faculty really reported problems in their classroom. So faculty said, John is not showing up to class or didn't show up to chemistry, and then that was reported to our Student of Concern Committee, which initially included our Dean of Students, Counseling Services, Residence Life, and Academic Success Center, so our tutoring center. So these two things are the only indicators that they had that the student was in trouble. In come myself and our partnership with Oohlala. We were able to also give them event attendance to add on another prong. So we're now moving in the future towards an opportunity to really personalize services that help students understand, or that connect students to what they need to be successful. More of an intrusive mentoring model, so we're being proactive and not reactive. So connecting students to things like financial aid and career services, efforts that we know students need to know more information about before they can be successful. We're now trying to recommend students specifically based on the interest and needs. So we know we have 100% of students on the app. We have 100% of our events on the app. Now we know trends of what type of students likes to be involved in other things. And we're able to proactively tell them, hey, you should check out X event because it fits your profile. So in the end, we're trying to really get to this ideal student success pathway, and we're really close to kind of cracking the code. One way that we feel like that the app is being helpful, especially at least an emerging trend, even though there's no significant differences in GPA when they come into Oglethorpe, we have an admissions process that sets that bar pretty even. Within the first year, the students that have that app show GPAs. I'm not saying that this is causation, but I am saying that there is something happening between using that mobile technology, them students having that information, and more likely than not having a higher GPA after being exposed to the app. So we're really trying to intervene with our students. Just like Cedar Crest, we have, this is the same screen that Lauren showed, we have an event and exactly usage rates and feedback. All of this is going into one big platform, and now we get to intentional message students based on how they're engaging. So it's an easy way to see what they've been to, how that they've responded to the event, and based on their feedback, I now get to create lists of students and send push notifications to them to say, hey, you like this event, why don't you come to this next one that looks a lot like it? Or if you like this event, then you'll like one that's related. So here's our full intervention strategy that we use. In our Student of Concern Committee, we know within 6 weeks, if you haven't been checked into 3 events, we're going to intervene. If at the end of the fall semester you haven't been to 6 events yet, we're going to intervene. And by the end of the year, so 2 semesters, if you haven't been to 12 events yet, we're going to intervene. That way we know we're cementing the student experience and helping to make sure that they're getting what they need to out of Oglethorpe University. So here's how we've evolved. We had a decentralized system. Even my office, student engagement and leadership, was 7 different things. We've centralized through the app, put everything in one place, and now we're really striving to provide a more personal experience for every single one of our students through the data that they've given us. One way that we've changed the way the events are carried out, some of the feedback that we've gotten, Lauren's already showed you what she's gotten from Cedar Crest, but we've had, we're an older campus, we're 150 years old, so we have some buildings that aren't ADA accessible, and some student organizations were hosting some events in those old buildings that students couldn't gain access to. So immediately, I started to get messages like I couldn't go to this event because there wasn't an access ramp. So we started to change the way that we hosted events on campus. We had students who have food allergies, and some student organizations or athletics or things like that were only putting gluten on the menu or not vegetarian on the menu. So we're able to help inform them and make a better student experience. Basically, we're starting to build a more inclusive environment outside the app because of feedback that we're getting inside the app. And then one thing that we've started to pioneer because we are so student focused now, we think in our philosophy, is an open suggestion box in the app. So students know that they can go to the app, and if they're unsatisfied with an event, or they're particularly satisfied with their experience at Oglethorpe, they're able to tell us how it needs to be fixed. We've created this trust between student and administration, which at a small private liberal arts college is very helpful. If you don't have trust, it's hard to move the needle. So that's the end of what we've done at both of our campuses. I think we have several minutes for questions. Does anyone have any questions about how we've implemented, or maybe some misses or some hits that we've had in the past couple years of implementation? Yeah.
Just one question. When you have students that are responding to questions that come through, how are they? Do they go through some type of training, or is that just based on their own knowledge? I'm wondering about inaccuracies or misinformation that may be provided that then gets spread like wildfire if it's not accurate.
Yeah, so this is at scale. So we have an opportunity for every single event, and we have tons of input. And so what we've really appreciated, even with our star ratings, is that we're able to almost average the experience of the student input. So yeah, if we have one student that is our problem student, and we know who they are on our campus, we can take that conversation aside and say, what are you really feeling here? Is it something to do with the event? Is it something in your personal life? Like, what's really going on with the type of feedback that you're giving us? Because we want this to be helpful, and students realize that we're trying to be helpful for them. So it really allows us to normalize the feedback, because on my campus, we're getting a lot of it, which is good.
And we also have students, too, to piggyback off that question, like our orientation leaders, our first year experience mentors, they know just through their training that we do because right now a lot of the questions that we're getting is leading up to the student's first year. So they're intentional about those questions and know the answers and how we want them to answer. But you have some students that go rogue. Like, let's just be honest, that give totally false information because it's just a random student that's like, hey, I'll tell you about this, and I didn't get financial aid either.
Yeah.
And they really do go rogue. But then that's where we lean on our offices to say, maybe you just have somebody else intervene and say, hey, thank you so much for your feedback, Lauren. Actually, this is when this process happens, or this is when it is. It's done in a constructive way, not to kind of like tear them down. But most oftentimes than not, our students are kind of providing that feedback that we want them to say.
Yeah, it helps us to be transparent. Here's a really fun story. So here in Atlanta, Georgia, we have this really cool application that was made down the road called Yik Yak. Yik Yak is an anonymous platform where students could give input about their community. That destroyed our campus about 3 years ago. We're just now starting to recover from the type of animosity that was brought about by anonymous inputs in our community. So we had wildfires like crazy being leveraged against all sorts of different student organizations, fraternities, sororities. What has happened with this app is it has tied comments to students' names, real student IDs, emails. So now, because students are using this to be a legitimate way to have their voice be heard, because we're actually using the data to make their experience better. So it's tamped down that sort of crazy misnomer of what's going on, because it's tied to their identity. It's not anonymous. Yes.
I have a couple of questions regarding the way that you guys are using the tool and your students of concern. Did you note a change in the number of students that you were intervening with as a result of using this app based on the number of events they attended?
Yeah, we actually did. So we noticed so a student of concern actually meet every other week. And so we really got into the groove of this probably about 6 weeks in, which was right at the time that we realized that we needed students to come to at least 3 different events or services, or we were seeing some problems with them. And so, yeah, we brought in probably about 60 more students of concern because they weren't engaging in the way that they should. A lot of those students may have had great GPAs or may have done really well in the classroom setting as far as going to class and things of that nature, but they weren't getting the most out of their college experience. And that's what we really want for for them to do because they're learning those skills to help them build that career portfolio with their student experience as well. And so that's the messaging that we brought to our students is you're doing great in the classroom, most of them, but there's this whole other half, more than half of the student experience that you are harvesting, so make sure that you're going out and doing these things. Also, here's 3 things that we know you're going to be interested in, so come out and check it out for us. So yeah, about 60 more for us. A little bit more work, but we improved retention by 4%, by the way, after a year of doing this. Mm-hmm.
So both you mentioned about tracking of events on your campus and how it pertains to the co-curricular record of students. But not all activities and events are co-curricular. It's about reflection in the classroom. So how are you able to identify and separate and track how that record contributes to their student success versus the events that are more engagement and sense of belonging activities?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I know how we do it. Do y'all have a specific way that you
can start.
that you check it? Yeah, so we actually, in my mind, as you input an event, there's a certain office or person that's tied to the event. So for me, I track or sort the person that inputted the event or that it's tied to. So if it happens to be the provost or a professor or something like that, it's really easy for me to just quickly say, oh, that is a very academic focused sort of event, so that's great. But I also know who my designated administrators or student leaders are that are on the app, or if my name's tied to it, I know that it's strongly co-curricular. So that's one way that we easily sort it. But at the end of the day, it's the student's perspective. What do they think that they're getting out of it? Is this academic to them? Is this co-curricular to them? And so they're able to actually kind of pick and choose how they want to use it on their own resume.
What's interesting too is I had an opportunity to have dinner a few days ago with some people, and one of the things that we discussed was the importance that our students don't actually know that they're learning some things, which is interesting, right? And that we're doing all of these programs for them outside of the classroom, but they don't know that being involved in a club and organization is learning organizational skills, or how to accurately keep financial records, or how to speak in public, right? You know, career competencies is oral and written communication, leadership, problem solving, all of these things that happen very organically in different events that they do. So we can do the same thing and break it out by who's sponsoring a certain type of event. But what we really do and what we really are intentional about is to talk about, because students will come in and say, oh, I didn't do anything outside of the classroom. I'm only involved in 3 clubs and I go to these different events and I don't really do anything. So it's about changing how they talk about things to say, well, what did you do in that organization? And how did you, oh, you planned this event? Well, what do you think you did in terms of planning this event? Because I can tell you, you had 27 people attend, and of that, all of them said that this was helpful for them. So you must have done something right in that moment. So coaching them and talking about what they did, whether it was sheerly just engagement, or also if it lended to their experience as a student. I hope that answers your question. Any others? One thing I do want to say that I forgot to mention before is right now in the summer, we are working on implementing a single sign-on. So who, and this is just kind of like regular anything, who hates sign-ons for different things? You have 9 passwords, 9 logins, yeah. I cannot keep track of it ever. So what we're doing is we're implementing a single sign-on through the app this summer. So a student can only sign on or register for the app with their Cedar Crest College email address, which is linked to their student ID. So what happens is when they log or register for the app, their academic courses are already pre-populated into their calendar. So now there's no excuse to not know where they're going or what they're doing. On top of that, their professors are responsible for uploading their syllabuses into Canvas, which is our online platform for how we operate. So if their syllabus says that they have an exam on this day or a project due on this day, that also is pre-populated into their calendar. So there's never an opportunity to say that they didn't know or they weren't prepared. We're taking out the hurdle that was reliant upon them putting that in. And when we talk about the the healthy way to engage, we can have them pull up their calendar and say, well, where are you, okay, let's look at your course schedule, and let's look at when you have your exams and how you can engage on top of that. And we can have a much more rich conversation with them when they're coming prepared, and we can see what they're engaged in and involved in the same way that they do.
Yeah, at the end, we're meeting the students where they are. If it's in their hand, they're moving away from these desktops, laptops, where they're logging into Canvas or Moodle. We're a Moodle school. We're seeing less engagement in those delivery systems for course content. But whenever we're able to link it to the app where they're at, their one-stop shop, they're doing a lot of their own research themselves. We're seeing that they're coming to our advisors, they're coming to be better informed, and then we can have a lot better conversations at that point. And so we'll really appreciate how the integrations have worked. Like I said, with a single sign-on in Moodle, in our case, students seem to have a lot more background information about what they should be doing. It's been helpful.
Any additional questions? All right, well, thank you so much. I know it's been an exciting couple of days, and there's one session left before the end of the conference. So on behalf of Shane and myself, thank you so much for being a part of today's session with us, and enjoy the rest of your time and safe travels.
Thanks, guys.